There's a lot of ways you can try and get around it, but the Nuggets loss to the Pelicans on Friday night was bad. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. My name is Matt Moore, and I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. And I'll be joining you solo tonight after the Denver Nuggets home loss to the New Orleans Pelicans, 113-105 in Denver. That, my friends, is a bad, bad look. So, look, there's a lot to kind of get into in this game. Chat's already getting folks coming in. We're going to do a pretty quick one tonight because it's late on a Friday night, and there's been a lot to kind of go over. I will go ahead and just start here. That was a bad loss. Like, it was a bad loss. And it was on the feet of not the bench. Can't blame the bench this time. That's not what you can do. It was funny because there were people that were like, oh, I guess it's Facu Campazzo's fault. Come on, guys. Like, come on. Bones Highland was a +1. Austin Rivers was a +2. They got scoring, and they actually got more stops, but the starters just could not get stops. They could not get stops whatsoever. Will Barton got eaten alive by Herb Jones. Herb Jones absolutely just dominated the Nuggets. The kid's going to be an amazing player in the league, but they were bad. Any night where Nikola Jokic is -6, they're in trouble, if not going to lose outright. And I'll just say this, like, this was the kind of game that it can cost you playoff seeding. It just can. Like, this is the type of game where that can happen. If you mess around and you lose these types of games, a home loss to a bad Pelicans team. And look, they have Brandon Ingram and Jonas Valanciunas and all these type of things. Like, they are what their record says. But Denver's what Denver's record says. This is the whole thing. No Aaron Gordon tonight. So I get it. That you can pin that on it, right? Like, okay, well, you're missing your key starter and you're without Jamal and the MPJ. At some point, you are what you are. Like, we're getting to that point. We're at 50 games, guys. It's 50 games in. And they still can't find a rhythm. They have these streaks where they start to look like good and like they figured it out, and that all these type of things have worked out, and they put the time in to solve some of the problems that have given them so many issues. And maybe they've worked past it, and Jokic is so good. And then they have nights like tonight. And look, Jokic doesn't have a lot of nights like tonight. He had 2 shots in the first half. Like, I don't know what that was about. No idea what that was about. No clue. Whether it's Jokic or the offense, whatever. I don't really care about like what the dynamic is like that. You can't have that happen. You're going to lose that game. This loss, it's not the worst loss of the season. I'll point that out. We've had worse ones. The Clippers loss is probably the worst loss of the season. Still, I just look at this one and I go, all right, you finished the road trip 4-2. You tanked the second game of the back-to-back. Fine. You could take that game off and tank it. That's fine. You could throw that one out, rest it. Not tank, but rest. And that's okay. But you come home and there is here's the thing. There's all these things I can point to. I can say, like, well, Aaron Gordon and Jokic had a lot of minutes on him, and the Pelicans are always a tough matchup, and the first game back from a road trip is always typically actually pretty sneaky tough. I've seen this a lot where teams come back from a road trip and they're relieved to get home, but then they get bit in the ass by it. But at some point, Denver's going to have to turn that corner, and if not, then it makes some of the comments that Michael Malone has about, like, well, you know, if we make a move, it's about the future and about we're having guys next year. Those comments from Malone post pregame, if you didn't see him, check out Harrison and Ryan Blackburn. Ryan Blackburn in particular tweeted. Those comments are indicative of like a coach that's kind of trying to manage expectations and be like, well, this year's not really real. Well, you know, Harrison went over to DNVR, had the report that like they are going for it. That they do realize they can't waste Nikola Jokic's prime. They are trying to make moves. They did have Boogie Cousins, whether it's on a 10-day and he's still hurt. And they did trade for Bryn Forms. Derek says in the comments, this should have been a get-right game. Kind of worried about bad vibes combined with a matinee game versus the Nets. Yeah. To tell you that Nets team is horrific right now. We'll see if Harden comes back, but their effort versus the Jazz was pitiful. I just find it at this point with Denver, they have told us pretty consistently all season that they were one team, which is if our starters dominate and our bench doesn't mess the bed, we can get a win that's not overly impressive but good enough. And tonight they got the bench didn't mess the bed, but the starters didn't do well enough. You just can't get beat in Nikola Jokic's minutes. They don't have any room for error. They just don't. And equally frustrating in this game, if you look at it, like Jokic finishes with 25 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals. Okay. And like he admitted after the game, his effort level wasn't great. Like, makes sense. Barton ends up with 17 points on 8 of 15 shooting. Wasn't good tonight. Monte Morris had 19 on 6 of 12. He was good. But the Nuggets shot 45% from the field and 46% from three. They made 19 3-pointers. That should have been enough. Right? And the calls were definitely a problem, right? The Pelicans shoot 6 more free throws and make 5 more. But the Nuggets outscored them by 11 from 3-point range, but the Nuggets let them shoot 56% from the field. You just can't do that. Like at some level, you have to like man up and actually defend. And I'm sorry that you want to save it for the Bucks game. I'm sorry that you want to save it for the Lakers game. This has always been this problem with this team, and I thought that they moved past it 2 years ago, and they just haven't. They just haven't. This team still walks into these home games versus uninspiring opponents and are just like, whatever, we could probably just get out of this one. This team isn't good enough. Next year, it might be. I'm not even kidding. Like next year, MPJ back, Jamal back, the full core 4 plus Barton. Honestly, they probably do just roll through a lot of these teams. The bench won't be as bad because it's such an anomaly that it's been as bad as it has been. And it's probably they roll. But you're here now. And you have a window, and you have Nikola Jokic who's playing at this level, and you do have signs that this team can be very good. And they won't do it for more than 35 seconds, and they especially won't do it in any spot where it's not like a shiny TV game. And that, I'll say this, look, I bet on this team to win the title before in the preseason, and a lot of things have happened since then, right? Injuries and whatnot. But I'll also say this. Like, the Nuggets have not built any championship habits this season. None. They've built 0 championship habits. And it's a tough season, and I want to have sympathy and empathy for that. It's brutal. The bubble was hard. They had no offseason. They did 72 last year. They lost Jamal. They had a short offseason. They're back at it now. They lost MPJ. They lost Dozier. They've lost all these guys. So many guys have been out. It's been a nightmare. I'm not debating that. But at some level, like you have to kind of decide. And if that's it, okay, I guess this is just like the year you don't have it. Right? Because there are years where you just don't have it. But it's frustrating that the Nuggets had so much momentum coming out of the bubble. And they had so much, and they have the potential for such momentum when Jamal gets back. But you can't expect everything to just be like, okay. If things were just like, all right, they're fine, but they really need Jamal, that's one thing. And that's like, on the surface, that's it. But games like this are the ones where you go, if you have like a championship ethos structure, whatever you want to call it, you don't lose this game. You just don't. Pelicans are tough. I'm not even trying to like dog them. They're not the Rockets. They're not the Magic. Pelicans are tough. Ingram and JV. When Ingram and JV play, that team is record is not bad. But the Nuggets are better, and they were at home, and they should have won this game, and they didn't, and that's a problem. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about it. I got some I got some Jamal news I got to get to later in the show. We'll do that when we come back, as well as we'll talk about the trade that the Blazers and the Clippers made in the Western Conference. We'll do all that and more when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just football. BetOnline has the up-to-minute info on pro and college hoops, and NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of the current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new, amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, want to make sure you know about the NBA trade deadline. It's Thursday, February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and the Locked On NBA podcast will be covering it live from 2 to 4 p.m. Join Kim Becker, my guy John Corrales, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to get analysis of every blockbuster move. Subscribe to Locked On NBA YouTube and turn your notifications on so you know when they go live. You can also catch Adam on Fridays on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. And thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is the best way for you to support the show. We really appreciate it. We've grown so much this month. We actually might hit the 2,000 by All-Star break. That's wild. That's possible. Tell a friend. It's been great. Hope you guys are having a great weekend after that bummer of a loss to the Pelicans. Jovica says, hello, everyone. It's not a problem in our teams. The problem is that Barton is drowning the ball in attack and making too many balls in attack, as well as the fact that he's incredibly bad in defense. Look, Will Barton wasn't good tonight. I'm going to continue to say this. Will Barton's had good games recently where he's been really great. Will Barton's had great games this season. Will Barton's had to carry a lot of the load. Like, he's the one that's had to play the minutes. He's the one that's had to play the games. He's the one that's had to do a lot of this stuff. So, look, I don't disagree that Barton's been bad and Barton has bad games. He is not an every night player. He's just not. He wants to be, but he's just not. But again, Barton could have a bad game and they could still win this game, but a number of things did not happen in this game, especially on defense. And that's a systemic thing. That's the entire team. Man, the Bull 123 is always in here talking about how things are bad. Never the good vibes when the Bull is talking on the chats, which you could do if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right. So I think the other thing to keep in mind with this game, there's no tiebreaker kind of scenarios. The Pelicans aren't going to make any sort of like serious run. You look at it, Bones didn't shoot well, but again, they got stops. They got enough stops to make it work. Bryn Forbes was 2 of 11, so like that could have helped if he hit more threes, 2 of 6 from 3. Rivers was 1 of 5 from the field and 1 of 2 from 3-point range. JaMychal Green had a bad stint in the second half. The first stint in the first half was really good. The bench second half stint was not good. You can't really count on them for more than that. Composite doesn't play. Cousins doesn't play, and they said that they're still waiting on him to kind of get healthy. Grauer Pilger asked me, what do you mean risking playoff futures with the title of this show on YouTube? This is the kind of loss that if you wind up 1 game back and you wind up you don't have home court in a 4-5, you look at this one. If you wind up in the play-in rather than in the 3-6, if you have to play Phoenix or Golden State in the first round instead of the second round, then this is the kind of game that you look back on. I say this over and over and over again. Win your home games, win your division games, win the games against teams under 500. The Pelicans were 2 of those 3 tonight. It was a home game versus a team under 500. So Adam and I have talked a lot about how the schedule is easy. You know, the schedule really is easy. Nuggets have the easiest schedule. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter if you lose to the bad teams. You can't. And the other thing is you can't just assume that you're going to get enough versus the good teams. Just because you get up for it, you can't assume they won't. If you get up for a Suns game and the Suns get up for a Suns game with how you've played this year, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. They're going to win. They're better. Denver has not been able to find the best version of themselves because they can't even find a consistently good version of themselves. And that is a problem. Like, I've been Captain Optimist. I've been Captain Positive Thinking. I've been Captain like, hey, things are going to be okay. Things are going to work out. And I don't think it's impossible, and I think this team is still built better for the playoffs because they won't have to play the bench, which so often has been the problem. And typically, I would look at this game and just be like, okay, look, the starters have been great in 10 of 11 last games. They had a bad night, and that's why they lost. Okay. It's just that in this spot, it was really rough. If this was the Mavericks, okay, fine. You got beat by a better team because your starters didn't play well. If this was the Warriors or even the Clippers, okay, starters didn't play well. That's going to happen. So, okay. So, it's a problem. Blair Anfeld asks, what's the chance of the Nuggets and Malone split in the offseason? He's got 1 year left on his contract, which essentially makes him a contract year. I'll tell you, like, either they come to an extension this summer or he won't be back. That's not me reporting that. I haven't reported anything, but the Cronkies have tried that before. That will get untenable. Michael Malone is he will feel that he's accomplished too much to be a lame duck coach. Coaches don't like doing that for a lot of reasons, and they're right. It's not fair to them. You should not have to coach as a lame duck. You just shouldn't. You should, either you're the guy or you're not. I tend to think they'll probably get an extension. Malone's had a bad season. Do not overlook what Malone's done with this team. And do not think that you can get better. I'll just tell you, the odds are much higher that you try and replace Michael Malone and wind up with a categorically worse coach that looks like a disaster and everyone misses Malone than they are that you find the next Steve Kerr. Just letting you know that. I think defensively, while Aaron Gordon's absence is obviously huge, their problems continue to be perimeter penetration and not being able to contest enough. They just don't have great contest. And I'll say this, I was arguing with Ryan Blackburn about whether they really needed a defensive wing, and games like this make me look like an idiot for arguing against it, because you got to have somebody who can get a stop, and it's asking a lot of Davon Reed. I don't think there's necessarily options out there. I don't know that there's a good wing that you can get. They kick the tires on Alec Burks, but honestly, I think they found that he's too expensive for what they're looking to do. They don't have the contract to make it work. So that's an issue. I don't mean to harangue on this loss. It's just a matter of, I think that if I'm going to try and spin these things through a positive light or try and keep perspective, then when I actually do think it's that bad, I think it's important to talk about it being that bad. Jovica mentions that Barton is not a starter, and that's absurd. This team has won a ton of games with Will Barton as starter. That's just not true. Alex Lerner says we would have won this one with AG. Maybe. But the problem is, the margin should not be there. Right? This just should have been probably a 10-point win. And that's kind of an issue. It seems a lot like Central Europe is up and very mad at Will Barton. That's what it seems like in the comment section. That's what is kind of coming out here. There's a lot of time to turn this around, and look, they can get back-to-back wins versus the Knicks and Nets, and it looked entirely different, right? And then they can, pull off a big win here in a couple weeks and get good vibes rolling. I'm more concerned about the fact that they can't go on a sustained winning streak. They can't, and 4 is good. I just mean that it always feels like there's one of these losses that's not just okay, they lost one, but then they went back and won. It's they win 4 and then they lose 3, and then they win 2 and then they lose 4, and then they win 5, and then the Raptors are like this. You got to be a lot more consistent, and that's pretty important. Grauer says we should just accept that without Jamal we suck and not put too much weight on how we look right now because this isn't the team. I don't disagree, except this is the team, right? Jamal's not going to come in and be mega star. Hell, Jamal couldn't make an all-star game, right, in the regular season. And Jamal was insane in the playoffs, incredible, and had some incredible nights, and he'll help. I've talked a lot about how he'll help in a million ways. You're still going to have some of these problems, and you're going to have to be better. Even if the problems get worse, the strengths may not improve. And the problem I have with that is you have Jokic playing at this level. You do have a window. the West is not filled with like, there's not a Golden State. Just seeing the Suns are really awesome. And I get everyone that doesn't think the Nuggets can beat the Suns. And I probably don't at this point either. But the window's still open and you should be able to make a run. You just should be able to make a run. And the fact that they can't get the foundational pieces to operate at a high enough level, I think is concerning. Alex says 3 out of our 4 players are out. It's too much. Maybe. That may be true. But the New Orleans Pelicans are without literally their best player and everything the franchise is built around in Zion Williamson. They're without Josh Hart, which that's actually like a really, like, that's a big deal for the Pelicans. Josh Hart has become a very key part of them. Those guys don't mean that it's equal to Jamal and AG and MPJ, but it does mean that it's the same thing I keep talking about. This is what you got, and you got to make it work. And they're not being able to figure that out. And that's a problem. I have some trade stuff that we need to talk about, as well as a Jamal update that we'll get to on the other side. But first, I need to tell you about good old Built Bar. It's January. Everyone's talking about New Year's resolutions, but they're going to stick to it if they're using Built Bar. If you tried Puffs, if you haven't, you're missing out on the Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like yummy cinnamony churro. I love churro. Coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are all going to be your new favorite. Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate, Puffs included. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart, and you're going to be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, and low carb. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. These are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It was delicious, and it'll be good for you. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKEDON for 15% off. That's 15% off at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making us part of your day and making us your first listen each and every day. Make your second listen Locked On Bets with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. All the best gambling analysis you need on Locked On Bets. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's the best way for you guys to support the show. We appreciate it. Hope you guys are having a great weekend when you listen to this. All right, so I checked in on Jamal stuff today and this is before Malone once again hinted that Jamal may not be back this year, which again, that doesn't track with anything I've heard. What I have heard is that Murray was in health and safety protocols a couple weeks ago. He got out on 31st. The problem is that duration meant that he wasn't in rehab. So there has been like a slight bump back. Not significant, but it does look like I'm going to wind up being wrong. It's probably not going to be February. It's probably going to be first weekend of March. And I'm going to look like an idiot. And that's frustrating. But Jamal will, I still have every reason to believe Jamal's going to be back in March. I don't have any reason to think it's going to be super late, but we should start hearing about contacts at some point. And if he hasn't started contact by, I don't know, probably after the week before All-Star, that's when I'm going to start getting worried about him being able to make it back before like mid-March. So there's still possible. It's still possible things could wind up and he could end up like right at the end of February, but it is looking like it's going to be March. That's how it goes. Health and safety protocols. So there's been a little bit of a bump there. So that's where that's at. Trade talk. The Nuggets are continuing to look at a number of options. They are not interested in Dennis Schroeder. That's not an option for them. They are looking for wings. They are looking for centers. Those are two things that they have kicked the tires on. There's not going to be like a lot of like, if they do something, it's going to be tiny. The word that was described to me today as far as their approach was passive. And what that means is they'll take calls, they'll assess things, they're open to conversations, but they're not out there hunting down a deal. That probably changes the closer we get to next Thursday. They'll probably get more active. What they've usually done has been quiet. And then by Monday or Tuesday, that's when they get more active in the deadline. So that's when I would tell you to probably expect a lot more substantive rumors to start popping up. The Clippers made a trade with the Blazers today. So the Blazers, who gave up a first round pick for Robert Covington and a pick and Gary Trent Jr., who scored like 30 in 4 of the last 5 games, to Toronto for Norman Powell, traded Powell and Covington for Eric Bledsoe, Keon Johnson, Justice Winslow, and a second-round pick. Yikes. The Clippers get better here. That's the long and the short of it, is the Clippers get better here. Ty Lue said last night they're not expecting Kawhi Leonard back. Kawhi's kind of talked about the idea that he might still come back. We don't know about Paul George. It does kind of look like next year is going to be really interesting in terms of if the Nuggets are kind of like, hey, we got to get everybody healthy and then make a real run next year. Like next year is the run, which it was going to be this year, but alas. If this year is not the run and next year is the run, well, guess what? It's going to be the run for the Clippers too. And it's probably going to be a run for the Suns again. And the Warriors aren't going anywhere. So just a little thing to look forward to as the pressure mounts on Denver. It was a good deal for the Clippers. They got nothing. They gave up very little. Bledsoe is a rough go at this point. The Blazers managed to get under the luxury tax, so congratulations to them. It's sad that that's where they were at, but they're not the only team that's there. There's other teams like Boston that are looking to get under the cap. However, they're trying to get there. Looking through the comment section. Big Honey says, our starters are great, especially when healthy. The bench, we need a better construction for that. Too many small guards and no 3-and-D wing stopper, no true C since Boogie went out. I do want to say, there's not a lot of great 3-and-D options off the bench in most places. Cam Johnson is an exception to this. There's a couple around the league, but like usually if a guy is good enough shooter to be a 3-and-D weapon, he starts. Like DeAndre Hunter moved into the starting lineup pretty quickly in Atlanta, right? And there's just not a lot of options for the kind of wing I think that people want, and they all come with like pretty serious complications on whatever. Again, I do think that if they do make a move, it's going to be pretty minor. Alex asked, are the Nuggets going to be trading people before the deadline? I would tell you that right now my impulse is no, just because I don't know that there's going to be a lot of teams that are like, oh yeah, we really want your guy. Right. And the Nuggets aren't looking to take on a lot of salary. You want to get better, you got to take on more salary. And the Nuggets are already at a lot. So taking on more salary gets a little bit tough in that situation. Covington's okay. Alex comments on Covington. He says he's great. Covington's okay. Kelly Oubre cost too much. It's going to be outside their price range. Again, you got to be looking for guys that are on pretty cheap deals. Oubre, honestly, is like, that's a good comparison for where Oubre's at this season. Like, he is the second in line for Sixth Man of the Year at the sports books. Like, that's where Oubre's been this year. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be back next week. More talk about trades. We'll see where the Nuggets come out on Sunday versus the Brooklyn Nets in an early tilt. We'll have that game afterwards for you here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day, making this part of your weekend. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys again on Monday with another edition of Locked On Nuggets.